All right, welcome everyone. Uh, Thank you for joining us for our second in our series for the Houston CPA's leadership webinars. We're glad to have all of you around. I'm Donnie, I'm your Director of Innovation here at the chapter, and we've got a great webinar lined up for you today with Brian Cush, coming from Intend to Lead, one of the business partners that I've been working with for a while now. And what I love about Intent to Lead is that they're bringing in their CPAs, and they're bringing in some of our different, what we're calling success skills, and helping to promote that within the profession. I do want to remind you that to get your credit, what you need to have done is when you signed in, and I see all of you that have signed in have used the first and last name, please also make sure that your email matches the email that you submitted as part of your registration to the chapter. If you have not done that, please chat it over to me so that we can make sure that you get your credit. I see we have a question on the PDF. The PDF was submitted. I'm not sure if Lauren or Christy got that out to you all yet. If not, we will be getting that, should get that out shortly. I'll follow up as soon as I hand this over to Brian. And so with that, thank you for joining us. Oh, let me make sure. So again, you're gonna have to respond to the polls. So let me push one poll out to make sure everyone can see the polls. So this first poll is really about the size of organization you're from, and this would actually help Brian get some perspective on the size of organizations we're working with on the webinar today.
Great. Okay, so thank you, Donnie.
And with that, I'll hand it off to you, Brian.
Thanks. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. As Donnie said, my name is Brian Cush, and I'm really happy, excited to get to connect with you today. We're going to be talking about feedback, and feedback is a topic that I'm personally very passionate about. The company I work for, Intend to Lead, is pretty passionate about it. And I'd say just by you joining and signing up today, that there's probably some passionate for you too about it as well. So thank you for attending. Please know that the session, as you may know, is going to be about 50 minutes. This is about sharing some information with you, some theory, some concepts, maybe a tool or two that you can take away from it. And then there'll be a part two that Donnie's gonna run as well. Now, having said that, if you have any questions, you can absolutely put them in the text box, just as someone already did about the PDF of the presentation. So if you have any questions as we go along, I'm very open and be excited to be able to take those, answer them as we go along as well. Okay, just to give you maybe a brief sketch or background of myself, I am a leadership coach. I grew up in accounting, in the accounting world. I worked in public accounting, and I worked at a consulting company that just serviced public accounting firms. I did that for both of those for about 14 years. After that, I went out on my own. I created my own leadership coaching practice. And I really believe that if you become intentional with yourself and your own leadership and what matters to you, that you can have the most positive impact on other people. So that's kind of what drives me in my leadership coaching. I also work for a company called Intend to Lead. Okay, and Intend to Lead. So we're a leadership development company, but you know what we believe? We believe strongly that the future of the accounting profession, that your future depends on your capacity to love. Now, when I say that word love, here's what I mean. It depends on your capacity to choose love. So love of who you are right now, but the love for who you are also becoming. And that also means the love of the people that you work with and the love of what you're doing as well. So that's choosing love instead of fear, choosing possibilities instead of like scarcity and smallness and safety. So we really help organizations, we help individuals, we help leaders to access what we call the dimension of possible. And that dimension of possible is, again, choosing possibilities instead of fear. What is truly possible? And here's the deal. I really believe that there's more possible as it relates to feedback in organizations. Okay, and so that's what we're going to be talking about today. How can you create an atmosphere? How can you use some tools to be able to leverage and utilize feedback in a way that makes your job easier. Okay. And not only makes your job easier, but helps you to reach closer to your own potential. Okay. I've been in many organizations before working with them. You know how many times I hear this or something like this? It might not be this exact quote, but it's, I assume I'm doing okay unless I hear otherwise. So you can see that's a little bit about feedback there, right? It's kind of a sad statement, a sad state of being. The feedback that I receive is when I'm doing something that I'm not doing right or that I have to correct. So I just assume I'm kind of doing okay unless people come to me and tell me I'm doing something wrong. And I'll tell you, I've heard that way too often. And I believe it creates like a scared mindset. Okay, if I receive feedback that's always going to be negative or always something I'm doing wrong or that has to get corrected or that maybe the expectations have to be recalibrated, then wow, if that's the only type of feedback I ever receive, then I become defensive right away when I know feedback is coming. Okay, so we believe that it can be better than that. Okay, I've worked with a lot of organizations where they'll say, Brian, you know, in the exit interviews, when someone left, someone who we really liked, we wanted them to stay. Sometimes they'll tell us they didn't get enough feedback. You know, they didn't get the feedback that they thought that they needed in order to do their job really well. And isn't that what a lot of us just want to do? We want to do our jobs really well. So how do we get the feedback that not only help us to do well, but really help us to thrive? Okay, so I'm going to propose today a different mindset as it relates to feedback. The feedback we need in order to reach closer to our potential. And that mindset is where you get to take ownership of your own career and your ability to gather the feedback that you need to do your job so you can do it more efficiently and so that you can truly thrive. Okay, other people can notice some things that we don't. Other people can see things that we can't. Other people have advice and ideas for us that we don't always have or that we've only seen a glimpse of. That's where feedback comes into play. We get feedback from others to help us do our jobs better and easier. Okay, and in ways that we can thrive. Okay, so who in here has ever received feedback like this? All right. One of the points we're going to talk about today is that we are always receiving feedback. People are giving us feedback all the time. As humans, we make assessments about other people. We always have feedback for others. Okay. Maybe you've been in your car before where someone gave you this type of feedback. I will tell you, this is maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was going to Trader Joe's with my son, my 10-year-old son. And I was in my car. I was about to turn out into a left. So I was yielding to traffic. I was going to take a left at a cross section. Okay. And I was ready to take my left. I see a car come by and he's in the right lane there. So I assume he's going straight. I start to get ready to take my left. And I think what happened is at the last second, he switches lanes to the left and then takes a left right in front of me. Okay. Now I don't think I was paying attention in that great of a way. So I kind of had to slam on my brakes a little bit so that I didn't go and hit him. Okay. It was my fault, right? I should have been yielding to him. Our windows were open, his windows were open, and I received about 3 or 4 talking really colorful words. Okay. And I'll tell you, the first thing that went across my mind was, I don't think my son had even heard some of those words before. Okay. So in this case, the feedback was very colorful. Okay. But what I think is important about feedback is no matter what the feedback is, we can learn from it. Okay. And I got to talk to my son about why that person used those words and how I was at fault and how I wasn't driving as best as I could. And so really the feedback was, hey, I wasn't doing something I was supposed to. So it's going to be helpful to me so I can learn, I can be more careful with my driving and so forth. And so he got to understand and learn why. So I got to learn. Anybody can give feedback. You know what's really important in this world, and this may sound really, really obvious, and that is that the most important thing is that we receive it, that we learn from it, that we can take action from it. I've seen people give the worst, most unfair feedback to someone else, and I've seen them take it and use it in good ways. I've also seen some people give the most awesome, specific, actionable feedback, And I've heard some people that are just not open to it at all. Okay, so it's really important, just as much as giving feedback, it's actually the receiving of feedback. It's taking it, it's using it, it's leveraging it, it's coming up with ideas on how you can use it and act upon it. Okay, so no matter what that feedback is that we're receiving from others, we can learn from it. We can do something about it, even if it's feedback like this. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about today. How can you make it easier, more useful, and maybe, wow, even more enjoyable for others to provide you feedback in the workplace? Most organizations that I've worked with, feedback is hard. It's laborious. It's oh, I've got to check off something on a list. Oh, I've got to fill out a form. I've got to give someone feedback because there's some type of trigger that tells me I need to do it. And so now, oh, I got to go do the feedback. It feels hard. Sometimes it doesn't even happen. People procrastinate and wait. So how can we actually make feedback fun? If you could just come away from this session on maybe an idea or two where you could make feedback more enjoyable for both parties involved, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, or whatever amount of people, then I will say that we won here. Okay, I'm also going to give you what are the 5 essential elements or steps to meaningful feedback as well. So we'll take you through a step-by-step process on things that you can do to make feedback more enjoyable, and more useful. Okay, so why do we use feedback? And when I talk about feedback today, most of what I'm going to be sharing and conversing with you about isn't as much as the formal evaluation of feedback. It's going to be more about what I'll call feedback conversations. Okay, those conversations, sometimes those informal conversations that we have during projects, during engagements, okay, and during a relationship we have with someone that we're working with. Okay, so how do we use feedback? Well, one of the most common ways we use feedback is to course correct. Okay, so I receive feedback from others all the time on how I'm doing, just part of the day-to-day work that I do. Accountants, we like to use the word review notes, right? We give each other a lot of review notes on stuff that we're doing. Well, review notes in a lot of ways are a form of feedback. I may give you a review note on you need to fix this number or the way that this number links with this other spreadsheet over here. And that is feedback because I'm helping you to course correct, maybe clean something up, fix it, get it better. Okay. And so that's probably one of the most common ways that we provide feedback. Even our computers give us feedback. If a formula doesn't work or something like that, that's a form of feedback. Okay. And that's great. And that's helpful. That helps us to course correct. That helps us to provide quality in the work that we do. Okay, but that's typically not where the emotion is. That's typically a little bit, well, sometimes I get emotional. Maybe you get emotional when you get some review notes. Okay, but it's more about the exchange of information. Okay, feedback is also used to help us to uncover our strengths and areas for improvement. And one of the things that I think, and this is my own assessment, but sometimes I think based on the nature of what we do as accountants, based on how we've grown up, that maybe sometimes we focus too much of our feedback on fixing, on improvement. And I'm not saying that's not important. It absolutely is. But there's another real important reason that we use feedback, and that is to help us uncover our true strengths. What am I in some ways already doing well? Where do my true talents, skills, and strengths lie? And how can I use and leverage feedback to really uncover those things? Okay, I'm going to reference a book now. I don't know if any of you guys have read it. I really highly recommend it. It's called The Big Leap. It's by Gay Hendricks. And he uses a 4-step concept to think about what he calls your different zones. Okay, and so he has 4 different zones here. The first zone is what's called the zone of incompetence. And those are the things that you are pretty easily aware of that you do really, really poorly. Okay, you probably shouldn't be doing it, or at least minimize the amount of work that you do in it. Okay, that's something I'm just not very good at all. And sometimes it's easy for us to admit the things that we don't do really well. Now, let me give you an example. So a couple weeks ago, my wife and I, we've lived in our house here near Chicago for about almost 3 years now. And we just didn't have much art up on the wall. So we go to, I think it was called Z Gallery. place at the mall. We find a couple pieces of art and we like them. They fit the wall well and all that kind of stuff. We like the colors. We bring them back here. And then I realize, oh, wow, we have to put these pictures up on the wall. Like that's an extra step. It was real easy to go pick the art out. Anybody can go pick the art out. But now I guess I have to go put the art up on the wall. Okay. And I quickly realized that I was not very good at doing that. That sounds so simple, just to go hang a picture. You put a nail up on the wall, right? But I wasn't good at that. Okay. In fact, one of the pieces of art, which was a big piece of art, I realized that the way that they had it in the store was horizontal and we wanted to be vertical. So when I turn it over and I'm trying to put the nails or whatever in, they're on the wrong side of the picture and I can't get it to work. You know, the places where you're supposed to line it up and stuff like that. So I call, I don't know how to do it. I call the local art store. I talk to the guy and I tell him what the problem is. And I said, hey, can I bring this picture in so you guys could fix the hardware and move it to the other side? And he was thinking, oh, you don't have to do that. And in about 30 seconds, he explained to me just what I had to do. And he was trying to save me money, I think. That's what he was trying to do, because it would have cost me money to have them do it. He said, it's real easy, and here's what you have to do. But what I don't think he realized is that this was a complete zone of incompetence for me. Okay. And I wasn't even good at what his simple directions were. Okay. In fact, it probably took me about 2 hours to put up 2 pictures on our wall, one in our bedroom and one in our living room. Okay. And then what's interesting is that after I put them up, I actually moved the couch, because there was a couch underneath one of the pictures. And I moved it like maybe 5 inches away from the wall. And my wife's like, Brian, why are you moving the couch away from the wall since the picture is already up? And maybe you can guess why I moved the couch away from the wall. It was because I think that picture is probably falling down at some point. And at least if the couch is away from the wall, someone's not going to get killed by the big picture falling down on them. So I had no confidence at all in me putting that picture up there. Okay, so that was definitely a zone of incompetence for me. I don't do it well. I don't think that it ever is like something I really want to do well. Okay, so I should probably just avoid doing those types of things. Your zone of competence, okay, that is something that you can do pretty well, that you're pretty good at, that you're decent at. But you know what? There are tons of other people in this world that can do it better. Okay, your zone of excellence, those are things that you would say, hey, I actually do that well. Maybe I'm efficient at it. I'm good at it. And other people at my organization know I do it well. In fact, they probably give me opportunities to do more of it because they know that I'm good at it. Okay, but that's not your zone of genius. Your zone of genius are the things you do well, like your zone of excellence, but also those things that you absolutely love doing. They bring out the best in you. Not only do you do them well, but you love doing them. You've probably had some times in your life, maybe recently, where you were doing something on a team or individually or whatever, where you're like, wow, I just know I'm doing this really well. In fact, maybe in those times, you don't even think about time management because you know you're in your zone of genius. You don't worry about managing time because you know you're contributing. You know that others are benefiting from being in your presence, because it's something you're good at and you're really, really passionate at it as well. Okay, keep in mind, there's not much of a difference between excellence and genius except the love of what you do. So other people, even if it's in your zone of excellence, they're going to try to get you to do more of those things. But I think it's your goal. I think it's all of our goals to try to think about what is my zone of genius and how can I be doing more of that? Because then it doesn't become a job. It becomes an expression of who you are. Okay, and I think that feedback is a way, especially in the long-term part of our career, we need to be getting feedback from others that help us to uncover what our zones of genius are. Zone of excellence is great, but if you're in your zone of excellence for the rest of your life, something deep inside you is going to wither and die. But you know when you're working in your zone of genius that you're alive, that you're feeling like you're contributing, that you're there. And the world really needs that. Like, we need you to be in your zone of genius because that's where true innovation, that's where creativity, that's where passion shines through. So one of the ways I think we really need to use feedback, especially over the long term of our career, is really by soliciting and asking of people, hey, what do you think I do well? and that can be so valuable to get the insights from other people. Okay. And what we're going to define feedback is it's really an exchange between one, two, or more parties of information that helps us to maximize our positive impact. Okay, there's a couple technical words in there like data and interpretations. And Donnie, I just want to make sure, have you been able to get the polling down? I'm just now realizing it. Hopefully you've been able to do that, but let me know.
No worries. It's actually the next one scheduled for when you're done with this slide. Are you done with this slide?
I can be, yeah. I'll just say one thing before we go to the next one. So yeah, and it's exchange of data interpretation. We'll explain to you guys what those two words mean. That's going to be a crust of what we talk about. Yeah, please go for it.
All right. Okay, everyone, you should see the polls launching on your screen now. So the question for this poll is, how effective was the feedback that you've received in the past? So you've been hearing Brian give some great examples and discussion around, what makes good feedback, how we would use that feedback. So now we're curious. So based upon your experiences, are you receiving this meaningful feedback? Is this exchange? Is it helping you get to your zone of genius? And we're still waiting there's one more person that hasn't voted yet. So you can jump in there. Again, remember, you need to reply to actually 4 out of the 5 of these polls that we've got spread throughout here to get credit for this course. And with that, so Brian, we've got about half have said that it's been effective and half that said that it's just been somewhat effective in the past.
Great. Okay. All right. So that's good. So one of the things I think we'll talk about is how can we, as the feedback receivers, help others to make it more effective? Okay. So how can we help them in a like a team environment where we're working on this together? One of the biggest challenges I think I've seen in organizations when it comes to struggling with feedback is sometimes we see it as one person having to give another person feedback. Okay. And it's like laborious. It's tough. Oh, I got to now go give them feedback. I got to fill out a form, or I got to give them feedback. It's time to do that. Instead, I think what was great is how can we work together on our partnership, whether it's one-on-one or whether it's as a group? Sometimes we don't give feedback enough in groups. We work in groups, but we don't do feedback in groups. I don't know why that is. We should do feedback the way we do work. Okay, so let's think about it as an exchange. Let's think about it as a team thing where we're working together. We're helping each other. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to give you a tool or two that helps you to ask questions so the other person can give you more effective feedback, the feedback that you need. It's like Donnie said, the feedback that may help you to get more in your zone of genius. Okay, so let's talk about 5 steps to receiving feedback, 5 elements of feedback that may make it more useful and helpful to you. And the first one sounds really, really obvious, right? I need to solicit feedback from others. Maybe you've tried that. Maybe you automatically get people coming to you and giving you feedback. But sometimes we need to take ownership around our own feedback. And if they're not giving us enough, we need to be asking them for the feedback. We need to be being proactive about that. And one thing we should always do in those cases is actually ask for permission to have a feedback conversation. Again, that might sound really obvious, but sometimes people aren't ready to give feedback. Maybe it's not a good time of the day. That's why we should always be asking for feedback. Maybe they're struggling right now. Maybe they have their head under a rock. Okay, so when we ask people, hey, you know what, can we sit down and talk a little bit about my performance? Not only do we want to, yes, it's a good time, but we actually want to read their body language a little bit, because sometimes people will feel like compelled to say, oh, they're asking for feedback, now I got to do it. So read their body language. If their body language is saying, no, they're not ready, let them know that's okay. Say, hey, you know what, it seems like maybe you are a little bit busy right now. Can we just schedule a time a couple of days from now? They'll really appreciate that. Because sometimes people feel compelled to do it, but maybe they're not ready to do it, maybe emotionally, or they've got other things going on. So I think we need to ask for permission to have a feedback conversation. Okay, here are just some ideas that may be helpful to you. You do have a certain amount of minutes so we can exchange some information about how I am doing. What I like about this question is it's asking for permission, but it's also setting the tone so we can exchange some information about how I am doing. So it's a team thing. Again, one of the things I think people fear in feedback is it's you versus me. and I've got to be right, and I've got to be prepared, and I've got to have my feedback. And I feel like it has to be perfect before I give it to you, because it might be controversial, it might be emotional. Let's stop worrying about perfection and worry more about consistency, and worry more about the relationship and it not being perfect. Okay. I'd love to give your feedback on my performance today. Do you have X minutes so that I can ask you a few questions? Again, you're taking a little bit of the work away from them, because now you're saying, hey, I'd love to get your feedback and I want to ask you a few questions. And that might feel easier to the other person. Okay. So those are just some ideas on how we could approach that. Okay, so when we get into asking questions around feedback, and you may have some specific questions about your own performance, and that's great. But what I always think is we should also have some general questions that we're asking people throughout our career. And I think the most important one is this first one here. What do you think I've been doing well? Now, that might feel a little counterintuitive to some of you, because we're accountants and we think, oh, I always got to be about what can I improve or what do I need to fix? And I'm not saying that's not important. It absolutely is. But what's more important to your zone of excellence, to your zone of genius, is more about what are you already doing well. So it might feel a little counterintuitive. It might not even feel like completely normal to the person you ask it of, but I strenuously encourage you to keep asking it. Because, we can always figure out something we can do better. We can always figure out things we can correct and fix and improve. You know what? But your real talent, the real big you, that lies in the things probably that you're already doing well, some of which you might not even be aware of. Okay? So the biggest question you need to ask others, and I might even say that you need to ask yourself, is what do you think you've already been doing well of? I know this question for me has always been tough personally, because I can be a little bit of a tough critic on myself and judgmental. So I tend to zoom real quickly after I do something, even like this webinar today. I might go afterwards say, sometimes I relive the movie in my life and I figure out things I could have done better. But what if I sat down with myself and said, okay, before I get to that, the inner critic, the critiquing person, I'll get to that. What if I can first set out the things that I'm already doing well? Because that's probably where my true talent lies. And I need to be asking that question of others. Okay. And it might not feel exactly perfect the first time you ask. And guess what? If they don't have an answer right away, that's okay. You might say, hey, I appreciate you thinking about it. Maybe we have a conversation in a couple of weeks or next week or tomorrow. And you can just be thinking about, hey, what do you think are some of the things that I'm doing well already? So again, don't make them feel like they have to be perfect. Just make them feel like this is important and you want to continue the conversations. Okay. And you can always go to, where have you noticed me struggling? What are some things that you think I can improve? That's actually in some ways easier because we're so accustomed to going there. So again, I really want you to focus on what are the things that I'm doing well. And you can ask anybody that. You can ask your boss, you can ask your colleagues, you can ask your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your spouse, anybody. What is it that you think I do really well? And what I found is when people are asked that question, they actually enjoy the thought process that goes around that. And what I found is when you ask that question of others, it actually gets them curious about themselves too. And you might even notice that the next time they'll ask you the question in reverse. What do you think I'm doing well? Maybe as your supervisor or as your report. So yeah, I challenge you. Why can't we be asking about our strengths, more about our zone of excellence and our zone of genius more? Okay, that's where your potential really lies. There's an old quote that says, if we spend a lot of time on our weaknesses, we're going to have a lot of strong weaknesses. And maybe there's something to that. That's why maybe we should be spending more critique time, more reflection time on what we're truly already doing well. Okay. And you know what else we can do as the owner of our own feedback, of our own career, is when we're exchanging feedback, we don't even have to rely on them. What if they don't have an answer to some of the things I've been doing well? What I can do is I can go in prepared and say, hey, can I share with you some things I think I've been doing well? I just want to bounce them off you, see if you agree, see if you disagree, see if you want to add anything to it. And what's really cool is I can share with you, here are some of the things that I think I'm doing well so far. What do you think? Wow, you've really made it easy for them because they don't have to even do the hard work. They just get to endorse. They may even give you an example. They may give you an insight on something you didn't even realize you were doing well. Okay, so you can go to them. They don't even have to be prepared really when you are the one providing the examples. Okay, and then another question: can I share with you my own perceptions of what I've been struggling with? And I like that word perception because this isn't fact. This isn't the law. This isn't the truth. We're just trying to uncover and get a little bit closer to that. So I don't think we should go in saying, oh, I've got to prove to them that I'm doing all these things great. I think what we want to do is we want to share with them, here's my perceptions about my own strengths. What do you think about that? Okay. All right, so we've talked about soliciting. Now let's talk about how we can clarify or make the feedback more helpful.
Hey, Brian,
yeah.
Can I do another poll in between those two?
Please do.
So I'm going to launch this poll, which is really about, you've just heard Brian describe this concept of soliciting feedback. And when I actually had the preview of his slides, I was like, wow, sometimes I want it and I forget that I can actually ask for it. I'm like, how am I doing? What am I doing? So this poll is designed to see, for those of you that are in the webinar, to see, hey, what are you doing? Have you been soliciting feedback? A lot of you in the past poll, or half of you, said that you're getting somewhat effective feedback or getting some feedback, but here's a way that you can get more and hopefully better feedback. So how do you think you're doing? And okay, we've got about 2/3 of the people. So again, remember, you need to reply to 4 out of the 5 of these polls to get credit for the webinar. And with that, I'm going to start summarizing. So what we're seeing is we've got about 1/4 of you saying that you need to apply all the techniques. So good, a lot of there. So, we've got 1/2 about saying, yes, I need to apply some of those techniques. I'm kind of in that realm as well. And then the last one, you're already applying all of those techniques. But I didn't see a totally effective feedback yet in that rating. So Brian, I think we've got more to learn.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you. Good stuff. Okay. So when we're receiving feedback from others, how do we clarify? How do we make it more useful? Okay, what makes feedback more clear? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to provide you what I'll call a distinction, which is a way or a model to think about feedback that may make it more usable to you. Okay, and this comes from some of the complaints that we've heard from staff around some of the feedback they get from all levels, but especially from staff. And that is that the feedback that they receive is way too general. It's not useful because it's not actionable, because it's not really about behaviors. It's more about the opinions of the person providing feedback. Okay, so here's the distinction. We're going to divide feedbacks into 2 categories. One which is called data and the other which is called interpretation. So let me explain what those 2 things are. Data are information, or you might call it facts, about the world that is observable. They can typically be verified by another person. They're classified as either true or false in typically an objective manner. Okay, now let's compare that to what we call interpretations. Interpretations are evaluation judgments. A lot of people call these opinions about the world. They're typically claims that are more made by the speaker or the writer. They're not objective as much. They can't be verified. Okay, so let me give you guys a really, really simple example of this. What if I sat here and told you that I am a really tall person? Okay, now I know you probably can't see my entire body and be able to make that, but think about, do you think that that is data, a measurement, or something that's observable, or do you think that's an interpretation or my own opinion? Now, you're probably getting this one right. It's an interpretation, okay? Most people, if they saw me in person, probably would not say that I'm a very tall person. But if I tell you I am 5'9", that would be less objectionable. That would be less about my opinion and more about data, more about a fact. Now, you might get out the measurement tool and say, oh, you're really 5'8 3/4", but it's going to be less controversial. Okay, that's why what we really want to do, and maybe you're guessing this, is when we're receiving feedback from people, we want to push more on the data. Let me give you some examples. If I tell you that let's say your name is John, or if I just say to you, hey, you're not a very good listener. I'm giving you some feedback and you're not a very good listener. You guys can probably guess that is an interpretation. That might make you defensive. You might think it's about who you are as a person. It's also just my opinion. But if I tell you, hey, I noticed that when I was talking to you before, that you looked at your computer 4 times while I was talking to you, that's going to typically be less controversial. It's more about data. It's more about stuff that can be verified. Other people could see, yeah, your eyes moved from the person you were listening to your computer. And that is more something I can do something about that. It's hard for me to work with. You tell me I'm a good listener. I don't know where to start. But if you tell me, hey, I notice you always look at your computer, or you do it 4 times in a 4-minute conversation, oh, guess what? If I decide, I can change that. Okay, another example, the person, they didn't deliver the deferred revenue schedule to us today. Okay, that's more about a fact. It either came to us or it didn't. But if I say that person is not cooperative, that is an interpretation. That is less helpful as feedback. I can know if I got you the deferred revenue schedule today. I can deliver that. Next time I can make that right. But telling me I'm uncooperative, that makes me feel defensive. Okay, another example. You are not very detail oriented. Okay, great. Thanks for letting me know that. That's your opinion. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do about that. But if you tell me you didn't tie the total miscellaneous expense to the trial balance, well, that's something specific. I can do that. That's feedback. I know next time I should go do that. Not sure how you got detail oriented out of that, but that's something I can work with. So that's the difference between a piece of data and an interpretation. Interpretations alone, at least, are not very useful. So what you want to do is you want to strengthen them. You want to strengthen them with data. If you tell me that I'm not a good listener, that's great, but please tell me how you know that. What are the specific data points that you know? Oh, you said, oh, I broke eye contact with you. Okay, so I can work on having better eye contact with you next time. That's something I can work on. That's actionable. I can report back to you on how well I'm doing with that. But if you just tell me I'm a bad listener, well, that's your opinion. I might even feel really defensive about that. And remember, like we said, it's always about how you want to learn from feedback. So that's how we make feedback more clear. We ask questions like, what would that look like if you want me to improve on that? Can you tell me some specific actions I may take? Can you give me an example that would help there? We work with a lot of organizations where they'll talk about some things that maybe their people need to work on. Sarah needs to work on her executive presence. Okay, that's great. That sounds like something maybe she should work on, but that's just an opinion. That's just an interpretation. Can you tell me what someone with executive presence would actually do? Like when you notice with someone with executive presence, what specifically do they do or not do? That's data. That's workable. That's actionable. Jim, I don't think that the other seniors trust you. Okay, that's great. Now you want to make me feel really bad about myself. That's great. What do you think I can do to enhance their trust? Can you give me an example in the past where you feel like I've broken trust with someone? That is much more useful. Okay, so instead of letting people get away with broad interpretations, we need to ask questions, that help them get us to examples and data. And again, if they don't have examples right away, just ask them to think about it. Don't put them on the spot. Sometimes people won't be used to you asking for real data. They'll just be used to getting away with what I would call as maybe unfair feedback, which is you're not a very good listener. You didn't work very well on this project. Okay, that's not fair. We need more data. And let me just say also that we need more data, not just on the constructive or what we call negative feedback, but we also need more data on the positive feedback, on the things that are going to help us reach more to our zone of excellence or our zone of genius. If you tell me I did great on that project, that's not enough. That's lazy. And maybe you didn't mean to be it that way, but I need to know what did I specifically do so that I can keep repeating that. Oh, I noticed what you did is you did these 3 things. Number 1, every Monday at 9 a.m., you sent the controller an email that told him where we were on the project. Okay. Another thing that you did is when an email was sent out where it was not clear what was going on, you called the client, got on the phone with them, had a 15-minute meeting to clarify where we were. That's nice stuff. I can repeat that. Now I know what I'm doing well. Awesome. Don't let people get away with just interpretations. Ask for data. Okay, so that's how we clarify feedback. Third step is maybe you've received feedback in the past that maybe you thought was unfair. You ever receive feedback where you might say, okay, I kind of agree with that, but I'm not sure really why that matters. It seems kind of peddly. It seems kind of minuscule. It seems like, okay, I can make that work paper a little cleaner or something like that, but that doesn't, what is the impact on that? So we always want to be asking for, especially with positive feedback. Hey, you know what? You thought I did a really good job with that. How did that help you? How do you think that helped the team? Wow, what kind of cool conversations are these when we actually talk about impact of feedback? Okay, so not only do we want to clarify feedback, but we want to understand what the impact was on the team or the organization or a client. Okay, now we're going to start getting into being a superhero when it comes to feedback. And I see this not done enough. It's pretty rare. And this last one is really simple. It's when we've had any type of feedback conversation, whether it was 30 seconds or whether it was 30 minutes, as the feedback receiver or solicitor, what we want to do is we want to summarize what we've heard. Okay, and that's really about two things. Here's what we came up with. So we're a team together. Here's the exchange of information. Okay, here's what I think we came up with during this feedback conversation. So you're actually sharing with them a summary. The reason why this is so cool is because people feel like, wow, this conversation was really worth it. Wow, we really came up with some stuff. You're summarizing for me what you're taking away from it or what you learned during it. And so people tend to feel very efficient and effective. But sometimes feedback conversations just end with a silence. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but what we should probably do is just summarize, here's what we came up with, and here's what I'm going to take away. Here's what I might start doing, or here's what I learned from this. It's really just answering those two questions. What did we talk about? What did we come up with? And what do I want to take away from this? Okay, and get in the habit of always summarizing the feedback conversation. Okay, you'll make people want to have more of these conversations because they'll feel progress. You've summarized what we've done. Okay, last but not least, and I think this is maybe the most underrated aspect of feedback. Whenever anyone
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, please, Donnie.
I'm so sorry. I had a poll that we were supposed to run after the last section, and I was listening to you so intently, I forgot as well. So I'm going to launch the poll number 4, which was, this is going back one section to the clarity of feedback. So with the techniques that Brian described about clarity and seeking clarity on the feedback, how do you think those techniques are going to help you? And we've got basically the same responses as the last poll in terms of, they can be applied or they can't be applied. So again, for those of you on the webinar, you need to reply to 4 out of these 5 to receive credit for the webinar. And this is actually our 4th poll, if I remember correctly. Let me double check. Yep, this is our 4th poll, and then we're just going to have one more at the very end of the presentation. So, okay,
good.
so
I'm glad you remember.
Yeah, feedback we're receiving so far, both yeses. So yes, I need to apply all these. About half, yes, I need to apply all these techniques more, and the other half is I need to apply some of these techniques more. Okay. So, sorry about that.
Thank you. Okay, so again, step 5 is always thanking people for feedback. Now, here's the deal. Even if you're receiving feedback that you feel like is not fair, maybe it's all full of interpretations, there's no data there, you don't even agree with it, we still want to thank them for the feedback. And what we're doing is we're not saying that their feedback is correct or it's perfect or even that they need to go and there's no improvement that needs to be made. What we're actually thanking them for is holding the conversation. Because we want to reinforce the behavior of let's have consistent conversations about my performance. So even if you disagree with someone's feedback, I want you to thank them. Make sure you realize what you're thanking them for. You're thanking them for them going out of their way of you holding and exchanging feedback information. Okay? Now here's the deal. So next time you see someone in the car like this, what are you going to say to them? You're going to say, thank you. Okay. So when we get the person in the car doing this to us, they're giving us some feedback and we can say thank you. All right. Now I have lied because I said there were 5 steps, but there are actually 6. Okay. And the last one will really make you be a superhero when it comes to feedback. Okay. And that is even after the feedback conversation, you can follow up later. It could be an email. It could be a, in-person follow up. But what you're doing is you're saying this feedback stuff is so important to me that even after we've had a conversation or exchange, I'm going to follow up with you then. And I'm going to do that for a couple reasons. I'm going to get feedback on the feedback. I've had some people that I do some coaching work with that have said to me, Brian, I had a difficult feedback conversation, but you know what I did? After the conversation, I checked in with them on how it went. And then we had a really awesome conversation. The first one didn't even go that great, but it was that follow-up that was a real human conversation. So you can be asking for feedback. Hey, you know what? I felt like I was a little defensive yesterday when you gave me that feedback. What did you think? People will love those types of questions. If they gave you some actionable steps, you could share with them. Hey, we had that conversation last week. I wanted to let you know I've implemented X, Y, and Z. They will love that. They'll feel important. They'll feel like, wow, you're utilizing their feedback. And we can even thank them later on. Hey, you know what? I think that was hard for you to give me that feedback. I just wanted you to know that I want you to realize that I really appreciated it. Okay, so if you want to be a true superstar as it relates to feedback, and this isn't always easy, but I want to challenge you on it. You can actually have a check-in or a follow-up later. It can be done via, I've even seen people that said they sent an email to someone else just thanking them for the feedback later on when there was some space afterwards. And they said, wow, that changed the relationship, Brian. Even if the feedback conversation wasn't perfect, they now realize how important this is and how important I think they are in my own progress. Okay. All right. So maybe we have a minute or two here for some questions if anyone you guys want to share any. But let me just I'm actually going to give you some homework. Okay. So there's actually an article that I think is great. Maybe you've heard of the concept of what's called the fixed versus the growth mindset. Basically, it's a way to think about our mindset in terms of learning and getting better versus a mindset of I am who I am. And if you tell me anything that's constructive, that means I'm not a great person. So the growth mindset, it means, hey, you know what? I can learn every day and feedback helps me to learn. It helps me to get better. The fixed mindset is typically, hey, you know what? If you tell me something positive or negative, that just affirms who I am as a person. And so I really encourage you to read this article. If I had to come up with a list of top 5 articles that I think accountants should read, this would absolutely be at the top. And hopefully as you read it, you'll see some of the things that we've talked about, or at least the theme will feel comfortable in the background. Okay, so I encourage you to read that. If for some reason a link or something didn't work out, let me or Donnie know. We can absolutely get it to you. Okay, so I want you to ask yourself just, what was your biggest takeaway from today? Maybe it's not 20 things. Maybe there's just 1 or 2 things that resonated with you, and what are you going to do with it? And that's my wish for you, is that you're able to take away at least one thing that helps make your life easier, that helps to get you closer to your zone of excellence, your zone of genius. Because like I said, that's really what we all need and want from each other. For the world to get kind of the big best you. And we do that by you reaching and having the courage to say, you know what, I'm going to use feedback in a way that helps me to really uncover my own gifts. Okay, and hopefully we've given you a few techniques here today that will help you with that. And I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed the time here. I will keep this slide up. And Donnie, I think you need to do the last polling question. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the box right now. And I would be happy to, in the remaining seconds, answer them. But if you don't have any, I just want to say it's been fun for me. I hope you've been able to take something away from it. And I've really enjoyed it. Okay.
Well, Brian, we'll see if they actually got something from this. So our last poll is, how relevant was this webinar for those of you that are on the call? So last poll that we've got here. So thank you very much again, Brian. I enjoyed this as well. I've heard you talk about other topics, and the first time I've heard you give this one, and even I was like, well, how much can we actually tell people about receiving feedback? Isn't it like I sit there and I nod and say, yes, thank you. But no, this is a lot of really great information. as we've got in here. So, and we've got concurrence from our audience. So 75% is saying this has been very relevant, can use a lot of the information. The last quarter is one step lower, saying it's relevant, can use the majority of the information. So definitely good feedback for you on the relevance of the webinar. So thank you again, everyone. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, and I didn't see any come in via the chat. So with that, I will thank you very much, Brian, and thank you everyone for joining us. Yeah, you'll be getting your evaluation in through the link as usual for us, and the CP as well. And I will be sending the CPE records over into our chapter for processing shortly. So you'll see it also, I think, show up in your records. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thanks, Donnie. Thanks, everybody. Okay.
Bye.